Trudy, did you always know it's going to be a play?
You know, sometimes in life things happen without you trying to make them happen. I had no idea I was going to write a play about stammering, none whatsoever. It just so happened that I found that my old English teacher, Neil Rathmell, lived about 4 miles away from me. I had no idea. So we met up and had a conversation over coffee. He found out what I did, what I specialized in, and came up with the idea, well, let's write a play. I said, what? That wasn't on the agenda at all. And from there, he came with me to meet some groups of people who stammered, some self-help groups and some therapy groups. We asked them what they would want in a play. So things like triggers for stammering came up. So the bell, the school bell features in the play. That was one of the first ideas that came from them. And from there, the drafts of the play were again taken to the self-help groups and the therapy groups. So they read them, gave us some more ideas. It went to the BSA conference in Liverpool, the final draft. And we got some great ideas from them, including there's a bit where Alex gets put in a straitjacket. The shirt sleeves are too long and they get kind of wrapped around him. Again, that was an idea from a person who stammered, who said for him, stammering was like wearing a straitjacket. So all the way along the process, the ideas and the true narratives of stammering were incorporated into the play.
You prepared Neil for this, or?
Absolutely. He had no understanding of stammering. I don't think he'd ever met anybody who stammered. So it was really important that we introduced him to people and he heard their narratives. Obviously, for me, I'd heard lots of narratives, but he hadn't heard any. And we wanted to make sure those narratives were what were represented in the play.
Were there any parts of the script that the BSA, you said, right, wanted to make a change?
Yes, at the Liverpool conference, somebody spoke up about the relationship with the young Alex and his mother, and wanted a scene in where he was overhearing what the mum was saying to the gran, because that was a specific memory he had, and he didn't feel that was strong enough in the draft that we read there. So yes, that was incorporated.
And the reception overall, how would you describe it?
We did the stage play, or you mean draft?
The draft, yeah, the draft.
The draft of the play. I think it's quite difficult to imagine a draft being acted out. I think I don't think there was perhaps an understanding of the power that it had, and that really wasn't apparent till the stage productions. You know yourself, when you read something, it's very different than when, you know, it's being acted out. There's a whole different dynamic to it.
How long did it take you from the draft to the stage part?
It was probably a year.
Okay.
And we engaged the Leeds Arts Centre, which was an amateur dramatic group that I was a member of. Asked them if they would like to put the play on, and they were really, really keen. At that point, I had no idea who was going to play Alex. I was open to people from the stammering community coming to audition for any of the roles, not just not just Alex. And again, it's one of those chance things that happened. I was in the gym. I met somebody who was studying to be a speech therapist. Met her mother. She said, oh, yeah, she's studying and she knows about you. I said, oh, she can have a book. So I gave her a book. And then, lo and behold, this Oliver pops up at an audition, who's her brother.
Wow, okay, full circle.
Molly, do you want to say any more about how that happened?
Yeah, very much the same experience as yourself. It was one of those situations that was just, it felt really like meant to be. But you know, my sister, who was the lady in the story, was going to the gym, heard about Dr. Trudy Stewart. She's like, oh my God, Dr. Trudy Stewart comes to this gym. I've referenced her in my studies, and we were talking about it. And then she was saying how she gave her a book. And then she was like, she's doing this stage play that sounds amazing. And she's actually, you know, she's looking for this boy, like a young man really, to play this role. And then just left it there. And I was like, well, did you suggest me? And she was like, oh, I forgot you act. And I was like, yeah, put me in touch, please put me in touch right now. Put me in touch. Trudy sent me the script. And I got the script quite late, I think, in the evening. I was checking my emails, and I was so excited to read it that I had to read it then. And I was like, do you know what? I'll read the first 10 pages. I'll get an idea of the character, and I'll pick it up tomorrow. And I finished the whole thing in one sitting. I was like completely engrossed in this thing, because just like Trudy said, the power of this script was just like palpable. You could really feel how emotional, how deep rooted, how authentic it was. And it, as an actor, it's literally the dream role, especially for myself. I love thought-provoking drama, and this was exactly what I was looking for. And I think conversely to Trudy's experience, where she wasn't sure how that would be on stage and the power of that on stage, I came from that sort of theatrical side where I read it immediately and I could see exactly how this was going to play out. And I was completely obsessed with getting this role. I watched The King's Speech twice. I got my sister to give me a breakdown of all the different types of stammering, you know, like blocking, prolongations, repetitions, etc. And I came into that audition just knowing the whole script inside out, and just was ready to do anything to get that role.
I just wanted to ask if you had any prior experience, but you just have prior knowledge, and that's a big plus, I think. Trudy, were you looking for an actor who knows that stuff, stammering?
No, not necessarily. I would have taken a person who stammered into the role. I think that would have been quite something, but that didn't happen. We got Ollie, and I was very happy.
Yeah, I
You
think
did your homework.
Yeah, you know, that's exactly what it is. When you read a script that's directed at a specific audience to send a specific message, if you go into that audition not knowing what that means or the authenticity of what it's trying to address, then really you haven't done your job properly. And, you know, realistically, I just wanted to be prepared, because I knew who Trudy was after speaking to my sister. Obviously, I had no prior experience with stammering, so I'd never read any of Trudy's books or anything like that. But, you know, as soon as I heard that this was from a professional standpoint, it was written by professionals, by people who had experience in this area, I couldn't go into that audition not having some kind of, you know, higher level of knowledge than the basic, you know, than the average person is how I was looking at it. The more prepared I would go into that audition, the more I could show Trudy how serious I was about the role, and by the looks of things, that worked.
Oh, you got the role. What was next?
Getting the role was probably one of the most significant parts of my acting career, genuinely, and it's a moment I will literally never forget, because I can I can remember exactly where I was. I can remember the feeling I got when I got the call from Trudy. But before I got the part, we went into the audition, and I was really, really nervous. We went into the audition, and immediately we started blocking things out, didn't we, Trudy? We had someone putting me in a chokehold and how I would respond, and we got to looking at dates because I was at university at the time. I was finishing my first year. I had exams coming up, and she was like, "Oh, well, if we can make this work, you know, when would we be looking at?" And I was really excited. Went home, and literally, I think about an hour later, Trudy called me, and I was with my brother, and I was like, oh my god, I'm getting a call from an unknown number. Like, this could be the call. And then I got the part, and I just remember going like that to my brother and just being like, yeah, I've got it. And then that's when things started to set in terms of reality. Because then I realized, you know, this isn't just a fictional character. This isn't something that can go under the carpet. This isn't something that I can just walk into and, you know, do the way that I've already seen it in my head, if that makes sense. Obviously, that's part of it, but I couldn't just go into it and play it like a fictional character. I had to really understand stammering, and I had to really make this authentic, because realistically you're portraying real people's stories, and that came with an enormous weight, and that's when the real fun began, you know, in terms of actually preparing, rehearsing, learning lines, meeting with people who stammer. So the preparation process was a long process.
So the first rehearsal was the whole cast meeting with a group of people who stammered, and we did a sort of speed dating activity where each of the roles, each of the actors talked to different members of the stammering community about their relationship with that particular role. So, for example, the father would go around talking to each of those adults who stammered about their relationship with the father. Similarly, the mother, the grandmother, and so on. So there were lots of different narratives that they were learning about. They were also able to ask that group what they wanted that role to be seen as, how they wanted it portrayed. So again, the stammering community were dictating how those roles should be played out, not me as a director, but the stammering community. In relation to Alex, I identified a young person who stammered, who had a particularly overt stammer that I knew about. And I blocked the script in relation to how Jordan stammered. So I marked the Ollie script, showing him which words and which letters and which type of stammering Jordan would be stammering on. And then I let Ollie meet Jordan, and they had a conversation about how Jordan stammered. Ollie, do you want to say something about those coaching sessions?
Sure, yeah. I mean, first of all, Jordan was certainly, you know, had one of probably the most severe stammers I'd seen, but also certainly the most severe I'd seen in person. And so physically, it was about taking in what that looked like and how to actually replicate that, because obviously these are involuntary movements, and how do you make something involuntary seem involuntary when it's voluntary? So breaking down the physical aspects was really important. But I think it mainly started with learning about specific areas that he would struggle with. Saying his name, he'd struggle saying I. He would always stammer on saying I, and he would block quite severely. So knowing which trigger words would be related to, you know, blocking or repetitions and things like that was really important. But generally, just, you know, getting to know him as a person as well was really valuable, because that's where those real stories lie, is in the details, in the daily life of a person with a stammer. You know, it's not just all about these key life events or struggling to get a job or struggling to get on the bus. It's about living with that and experiencing that every single day. So, you know, understanding the toll that it took on his body physically, he got used to it. But originally, when he got his stammer, he got it from an injury. It was very physically demanding for him to have such a severe jaw jerk. And I felt the exact same way when I was rehearsing it, but I could actually stop doing that in the rehearsal room. I didn't have to do that all day, every day. So, you know, I got a very, very small taste of people's real lives.
Did it change any way you perceived stammering? Because
100%.
you had prior knowledge, but
my prior knowledge was very limited. It was
Exactly.
educated, you know, it was theoretical. It wasn't experience driven. It wasn't you know, actually seeing someone or hearing those real stories. It was all theory based. And the King's Speech, as we know, is from a very superior perspective. It's not the everyday person, which is what Unspoken is. You know, a royal has someone to speak for them in most occasions. An average person really doesn't have that luxury. So, you know, the actual experience that I had was basically nothing. And then after the play, I would still not say I have experience with stammering. I think that's quite a, you know, dangerous way to go, is to say that you actually understand, because realistically, until you've lived it every single day of your life, how can you ever possibly understand? But ultimately, my understanding of it, I think is far deeper, but emotionally driven rather than theoretically driven, which is what it was to begin with. You know, understanding those stories, that struggle, that trauma.
We did some research, Dr. Jonathan Linklater and myself. We did some pre and post interviews with the actors about their feelings, attitudes, understanding of stammering before and after the play. And there were significant differences, so that the play was able to affect the way they thought about stammering, the way they understood it. In a couple of cases, the research showed that it went beyond that. It went beyond stammering, and it had affected their understanding of communication generally, in that they were more tuned in to the person they were talking with. They were more empathetic generally to the listener or to the other speaker. So it had far surpassed stammering and gone into just general communication, which I found very interesting.
what was the most challenging part of getting from script to the stage?
Do you want to go first, Trudy?
I need to think about that.
Same, that's why I asked you to go first.
The most difficult part was the responsibility of representing stammering in an authentic way, which bears out really what you're saying, away from the stereotypical blah, 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 blah. To represent what is going on internally, what's going on cognitively, what's going on emotionally. And the weight of that responsibility was quite hard. And I was worried that we were going to be able to do it. Sitting in the audience and watching the play and watching the reaction of the audience and hearing what they said afterwards, I was in no doubt that we had been able to do it. It's very different, I think, when you now, this group I'm now talking to, you have seen the digital version of the stage play. You are not being confronted with Ollie, standing there in front of you for an hour and 20 minutes and looking at you in the eye and making you confront stammering right into your very soul. So the digital version is different, but I'm hoping that there will still be some power in that people will still be able to get something from it, whether it can be used as an educational tool or whatever. But it's not the stage play.
There is power in that. It's very powerful. I can say that.
Thank you.
It is.
If I could just add as well, Trudy, I was going to say the exact same thing. And I know it doesn't sound real when someone says that, but my mind was cast back to, I don't know if you'll remember, Trudy, but this was probably the hardest part for me. Was I think we were probably a week or two out from production, from actually putting the play on. And it was all getting a bit much for me in terms of the weight of the responsibility, because I'd prepared and I'd prepared and I'd prepared. My jaw had clicked, and I'd felt the physical toll of it, and it was becoming very, very real, very, very fast. Even though I'd been aware of it the whole time, literally from getting the role, it sunk in. At that point, it really hit me in one audition, in one rehearsal. I don't know if you remember, Trudy, and you sat me on the step and you talked to me and you told me how far we'd come, how many people it was going to affect, and how authentically, and the fact that I was taking it so much to heart showed that we were going to do it. And that was by far the hardest part for me, was the responsibility and the weight of all of these stories, because also, when you connect with a character, you do carry that emotional weight anyway. So, you feel that deep-rooted connection to your actual character, but then you feel this deep-rooted connection to the stammering community, and then you feel this deep-rooted connection to representing that really authentically in front of loads of people, where anything could go wrong at any single point. And also, like Trudy said, it was a very intimate setting, and naturally, as a person, I was very exposed. So there was a lot going into it emotionally, for myself, but ultimately not really about me, about the setting, about the circumstances, about the responsibility. I don't think we've ever spoken about that day and that pep talk you gave me, Trudy, in an interview, but that question really prompted that thought, so I thought I'd share it.
Yeah, great.
You mentioned the audience's reaction, and it made you realize that what you were doing was right. Can you tell us more about the reaction? Because obviously it's going to be different from the real theatrical play.
So we always did a Q&A after each performance. So you were getting a bit of insight by the questions that were being asked. There were a lot directed to Ollie about, well, did you feel it? Did you actually experience that like I experience it as a person who stammers? But the audience was quite diverse, so we weren't just getting people who stammered. We were getting people who had no idea, and we were getting people from the profession as well. We did some research on the audience, just very basic research, sort of post interview, post performance interviews on a random group, and we amazingly found that they were moved. Their attitudes to stammering had shifted, according to them, that they had a better understanding. They had no idea stammering was like this. They were shocked. They were guilty about how they'd responded in the past, and moved. So yeah, it was interesting. Do you remember some of the Q&As, Molly?
Yeah, definitely. I think before the Q&As as well, though, what struck me sometimes was, and it was a worry every single performance, because when you're literally, I mean, at some points I think I actually touched the people in front of me by accident, like by dropping something, or falling on the floor and touching their foot or something like that. Only brushing, nothing serious, but literally within reaching distance of the people. The lighting was slightly different to what it typically is with a theatrical production. You could actually see a lot of the people's faces. And something that struck me was a vacancy in people's faces, and not disengagement, which I thought it was originally. And then I was really worried, because I was like, oh my gosh, they're not receiving this at all. They're not being receptive to this. It was later sort of became quite apparent that people were quite traumatized. And naturally, when people are traumatized, they become detached, and they're reliving these incidents in their own head. And that was something that came very quickly became apparent in the Q&A. Because, you know, just like you said before we started the interview, Justina, you said like it's quite traumatic. And when you're in a box room, in a dark room with just a spotlight and mist in the air and red lighting in the background, red ominous lighting in the background, that is heightened to a different height, a different level, and you could really see that. And then afterwards, you know, people would ask me, you know, are you a person who stammers? And I would say no, and they would explain, you know, how it took them back to specific incidents in their life, literally identical incidents. This wasn't something that, you know, Trudy had thought, oh well, that would be, you know, a situation that makes someone nervous or that makes someone stammer. It was real people's incidents, and these incidents played across seemingly every single one of these people's lives. Getting a bus, speaking in front of people, saying their name, performance in school. You know, a lot, obviously not everyone, but a lot of people have been in that position where it's impacted literally every aspect of their life that people who are fluent speaking completely take for granted. And so that became quite clear to me as well in the Q&As.
It started dialogue as well. I remember one guy telling me that he'd come with his 12-year-old son, and his 12-year-old son had said at the end, "Is it like that for you, Dad?" You know, so there's a start of a really useful conversation between father and son, where the son gets to understand what stammering's like from his father's perspective. And I know people who didn't stammer went away and talked about it over the drive home, and the next day, and the day after. A yoga teacher told me that they just talked about it all weekend. Wow. That's great.
Some people still talk about it to me today. Some people that came to see it the first time. Patrick, for example, Trudy, someone that was involved right from the beginning, and gave me a really phenomenal analogy about how blocking, I think it was Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, Trudy, but I think Patrick said that it was like a pressure cooker with blocking, and that really helped me grasp the idea of the physicality of it, that it would start, you know, right the way from his feet all the way up through his legs, and then start in his stomach, and it would start to build, and it would build, and the anxiety would build with that, and then it would start coming right up his esophagus, and then it would be as if he'd vomit the words out. And you know, those people still came to see it 5-6 years later now, just the recording, and to see us, and you know, and people that came to see it from my family or my friends, or people like that, they still talk about it, and they still say how it gives them a new appreciation for people who stammer.
This is a conversation we need to keep having, and I sincerely hope that this play is another step, very important step in this conversation. So my last question really is, what do you hope is the take-home message from this for the people who just watched it?
When we were writing, I had 5 themes in my mind. One was the choices people who stammer make. One was the vulnerability that those who stammer feel, that whereas I have vulnerabilities about certain things that you don't know about because I choose not to share, the person who stammers opens their mouth and stammers and immediately shows you their vulnerability. And perhaps they don't always have a choice about that. So that was another theme. But I think the most important theme was this idea of the burden of memory, which one of the characters talks about. And that's how some people who stammer carry with them their memories in such a way, the memories of communication or events or whatever, carry them in such a way that it impacts where they are in the moment, that they can't be there in the moment because they're remembering some trauma or some difficulty that they had in the past. And that was important for me to portray. So that's kind of a take home, I think, that I would say I would like people to have an understanding.
I think mine's even simpler than that. I would say just be kind and be patient with people. You know, it really is as simple as that, that because they speak differently to you doesn't justify you to behave differently to them than you would to anybody else. And, you know, we should be treating everybody with respect. It goes without saying. It's a very basic idea, a very basic concept, but in practice, it's very, very difficult. So just be kind and be patient.
That's a great answer.
I would like to thank you all for being with us in this International Stuttering Awareness Day in Katowice, even though it's virtual, but you are with us in spirit. Thank you so much. Would you like to say something to the Polish audience before we go?
I would be really interested in any feedback that people have that I can then pass on to the cast, because I think we're still learning about the best ways to represent stammering and change people's attitudes and understanding of stammering. So if people have any comments, then please put my email up, and I'd love to hear from people.
Thank you all for coming. And we hope you really enjoy the play. We hope you find it valuable. We hope that you learn something or gain something therapeutic from it, like the people who saw it in person.